In November 2021, a mother and daughter set out for what was meant to be a peaceful 4-day hiking expedition in the rugged wilderness of the Scottish Highlands. They never returned. For 6 years, the disappearance of Helen Fraser and her 17-year-old daughter, Mia, became one of Scotland's most enigmatic unsolved mysteries, until a wildlife biologist's experimental drone captured footage that changed everything. What that drone revealed didn't just solve the case. It uncovered secrets that would set an entire community at odds, destroying old friendships and giving rise to haunting questions about loyalty, desperation, and survival. November 18th, 2021. Dr. Alan Kerr sat alone with the duvet pulled up to his chest, gazing numbly at the silent screen of his phone. Midnight had come and gone. Helen and Mia should have been home hours ago. Their last message, cheerful and routine, had arrived just before dusk. Now only an eerie silence answered his repeated calls. Each ring went straight to voicemail, each hour stretching out the knot in his chest. Finally, with trembling hands, Alan called the number he had hoped never to use, the emergency response line for Cairngorms National Park. Cairngorms Search and Rescue, this is Officer McDougall, a steady voice answered. My wife and daughter, Alan managed, voice breaking. They're overdue from a hike, no contact. 3 days earlier, Helen Fraser had kissed her husband goodbye on the doorstep of their stone cottage in Aviemore. Her and Mia's laughter echoed down the frosty path as they loaded their battered red SUV with weathered rucksacks and a brand new tent. It was supposed to be 4 days exploring the Ben Alder Plateau Helen's birthday tradition, a way for mother and daughter to reconnect among the ancient pine forests and windswept lochs. We'll be back Tuesday by noon, Helen had promised, her eyes crinkling. Don't worry, we'll have hot chocolate by the fire before you miss us. Alan waved them off, never knowing it would be the last time he'd see them alive. Helen Fraser wasn't a novice adventurer. For over a decade, she'd guided hiking groups through the wildest terrain in Scotland, pinpointing hidden bothies, crossing snow-choked glens, reading the skies for storms. These were second nature to her, and she'd taught Mia well. If anyone could keep her daughter safe in the Highlands, it was Helen. But now, they were simply gone. Whatever took them from that mountain trail would become legend, a legend only the truth could unravel years later, at great personal cost. At first light on November 19th, rescue volunteers gathered at the Ben Alder trailhead. Helen's red SUV sat exactly where she'd parked it 4 days before. The doors were unlocked, overnight frost still crisp on the windows. Nothing was missing except their hiking packs. Detective Fiona MacLeod, seasoned veteran of Scotland's rural missing persons cases, arrived before sunrise. She surveyed the undisturbed vehicle, the parents' frantic faces, and made a quiet observation to Officer McDougall. No sign of struggle, no blood, no missing valuables, just the gear they took. This doesn't fit the usual pattern. The trail registry showed Helen's neat signature at 9:10 a.m., November 15th. H. Fraser daughter, Ben Alder Circuit, 4 days. Confident, as if nothing could go wrong. Search and rescue dogs caught the pair's scent immediately. The trail was straightforward for the first 3 kilometers, winding through moss-clad trees and over shallow streams. Then, inexplicably, the dogs began to falter. As the frost melted underfoot, they circled and whined, unable to hold the scent. That's not normal, muttered lead handler Gregor Sinclair. Not even the rain last night should ruin a trail this fresh. But there had been more than rain. A violent sleet storm had lashed the plateau on the night Helen and Mia vanished, burying the landscape in ice and confusion. And now, nature itself had become an accomplice, erasing whatever clues had been left behind. For nearly 3 days, rescue teams swept the Ben Alder Plateau and the tangled woods below, braving freezing fog and swirling sleet. Helicopters skimmed the treetops. Searchers probed countless bothies hidden in the hills, and thermal imagers scanned the icy lochs. Yet the mother and daughter seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Alan joined the nightly vigils at the makeshift base camp, clutching Helen's favorite hiking mug and watching every official's face for any glimmer of hope. By the fourth day, the investigation widened. News crews gathered at the trailhead, broadcasting to a nation suddenly obsessed with the fate of the Frasers. Local high school students organized search parties. Dozens of strangers scoured the muddy banks and peat bogs, and old friends dug through their memories for possible clues. Yet all led to dead ends. Detective McLeod sat across from Alan one bleak evening, her expression grave. A folder thick with phone records, credit reports, and printed emails sat between them. "We have to consider every possibility, Dr. Kerr. Accidents, wildlife, or," she hesitated, "that someone did not want to be found." Alan's face hardened. "Helen would never put Mia in danger. Not for anything." McLeod nodded thoughtfully but pressed on. The investigation into Helen's former life revealed untidy facts: overdue bills, canceled contracts from her guiding business, a letter threatening a lawsuit troubles Alan only dimly suspected. A recent text exchange with a C. Douglas suggested Helen had been looking for fast cash. Alan felt the ground shift beneath him. How much had Helen kept from him? Even the local rumors proved troubling. Neil McAllister, a retired ghillie who lived near the trail, told police about a shouting match he'd overheard. "Sounded like Fraser and her lass fighting about money, to be honest," he said. But maybe they just needed to let off steam. Mia's closest friend, Rona Stewart, offered another cryptic angle. Mia talked about leaving Aviemore for good. She wanted to study art in Edinburgh, but Helen pushed the hiking, the traditions. It was tense at home. The insurance company started asking questions, even before week's end. Helen held a life policy for $150,000, with Alan as the beneficiary. Maya's university fund was nearly empty. Under Scottish law, if both vanished or died, without clear evidence of intent, the money would go to Alan, but only if foul play was ruled out. All these threads twisted together, complicating the pure grief with suspicion, confusion, and shame. The village split into factions. Some believed the women had simply lost their way. Others whispered about running from debts or something darker still hiding in those hills. As November dragged into December, snow buried the plateau. The official search was called off. Alan wandered the woods in a daze, sometimes followed by a single black Labrador, hoping for any smallest sign. Search flyers turned to yellowed ghosts on shop windows. The lives of everyone involved splintered into before and after. Years passed, but the ache of uncertainty only sharpened. Alan clung to hope, launching his own monthly searches, aided by a small band of loyal friends. On anniversaries, local media ran retrospectives, never letting the case slip entirely from the public eye. The story of Helen and Mia Fraser became something like a ghost tale whispered in the pubs of Aviemore and throughout the Highlands. People said the trail had taken them. Others whispered that Helen had run off to Europe. A few claimed to have seen Mia's distinctive copper-colored braid on distant trains, or Helen's hiking boots at a car boot sale in Inverness. Every lead trickled away in the Scottish drizzle. The pain in Alan's heart turned into a hollow that no new evidence could fill. In 2025, desperate for anything, Alan hired a private investigator, Leslie Pryor, a former Glasgow detective known for her tenacity. Leslie picked apart the few available bank statements, Helen's encrypted emails, social media posts, and every photograph snapped along the Ben Alder Trail for that fateful week. She even tracked down C. Douglas, discovering he was an old climbing partner, not a debt collector, who hadn't seen Helen in years. Still, nothing. No flesh and blood answers. The insurance company eventually issued a presumed dead ruling after 5 years, and the payout went to Alan, but it felt like ashes in his hands. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles to the south, in the laboratories of the University of Stirling, PhD candidate Avril Ewa worked on her doctoral research. A revolutionary drone technology capable of mapping animal populations in remote, treacherous areas, places where helicopters could never safely fly. Avril's drones combined thermal imaging and sophisticated object recognition AI. She had no idea that her invention would not only reveal a truth hidden in the Scottish mists, but disrupt so many lives in the process. Early June 2027, Avril launched her newest drone prototype above a forgotten glen, 10 miles north of the Ben Alder Plateau. She scanned the vast, tangled terrain for signs of the elusive wildcat. The monitor flickered, distorting the greenery below. Then, in a shadowed hollow, the drone caught sight of straight lines and angles, a rectangle that couldn't have formed naturally. Avril zoomed in. Between the lichen and stones was a ruined tent, half buried by 5 winters' worth of fallen branches and needles. Next to it, a battered blue enamel mug its painted daisies faded, but still visible. Avril's hands trembled with excitement and dread. She radioed Cairngorm's rangers immediately. "I found something," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Within 48 hours, a search and forensic team picked their way along the narrow ridge to the hollow Avril marked. What they uncovered would haunt everyone who touched the case. The scene was eerily preserved, silent as a grave. At the far edge of the hollow, beneath a tangled pile of fir branches, lay a makeshift lean-to-still standing among the moss and rot, stitched together with rope and the remains of a beached fishing net. Inside, the search team found 2 sleeping bags, a rusted camping stove, scraps of notebook paper sealed in a Ziploc bag, and a faded, rain-damaged map of the Highlands. But it was the notebook that mattered, a thick, weather-stained journal, pages warped with time and water, but the ink inside still decipherable. Its first entry was dated November 15th, 2021, the very day Helen and Mia had vanished. The last scrawled lines, shaky and smudged, appeared to be from late February 2022. They had survived nearly 4 months in this wild, hidden hollow. Detective McLeod called Alan herself that night. "We found a campsite," she said gently, "and we found Helen's handwriting." Alan drove to the station in the pouring rain, heart pounding. In a small, bright-lit interview room, Detective McLeod carefully opened the journal, inviting Alan to read. The story that spilled out in Helen's slanting handwriting would explain the mystery and wound him forever. November 15th. We're taking the pass behind Ben Alder. Mia is worried about the weather, but I promised her we'd make the bothy by dusk. There's no service here, but I want to get as far from the old worries as possible. If you're reading this, Alan, I'm sorry. I love you. This isn't how I wanted things to be. The early entries mixed practical notes about rationing food, collecting water, keeping spirits, up with troubling shadows. The money's gone. The snow started early. Mia is frightened but so strong, braver than I am. I've tried to make a game of surviving. She misses home. December 25th. Mia made decorations from pine cones for Christmas. We sang around the little fire and shared our last chocolate. She asks when we're going back. I lie. Tell her soon. But I haven't got the strength to climb out, and the snow's too deep. By January, the entries became more desperate. Frostbite, hunger, days of silence when the river froze and food ran out. January 28th. Mia cried last night. She knows we won't get out unless someone finds us. I think I made everything worse. If anyone sees this, please tell our friends I tried to protect her. The final entry, dated February 19th. Mia is gone. I buried her above the ridge, where the sun comes first in the morning. I can't feel my hands. Forgive me, Alan. I loved you. I loved you both. Alan wept openly, clutching the sodden journal. The forensic team later found the shallow grave Helen described, marked with a pine cross and stones, looking out over the valley. Human remains and strands of copper hair confirmed what the journal had already revealed. A few hundred meters away, in a thicket of brambles, the team discovered a second body, Helen's, wrapped in her own tattered coat. The truth was excruciating. Faced with mounting debt, pride, and mental illness, Helen had chosen not to return, convinced she had no place left to turn. She had tried, to the last, to protect Mia. The revelation shattered the fragile peace in Aviemore. News of the discovery swept the Highlands, igniting an emotional firestorm. Some mourned the Frasers as tragic victims of circumstance and silence. Others were angered, unable to forgive Helen for her final, desperate decisions. For Alan, there was no neat ending. Only an unraveling thread of grief, guilt, and second-guessing. He found himself walking old forest trails at twilight, whispering apologies into the wind. At the memorial service, the village church overflowed. Mia's friends shared stories of her kindness and sharp sense of humor. Parents hugged their children a little tighter. Helen's former hiking partner struggled to reconcile her quiet strength with her hidden despair. The community was awash in uncomfortable questions. Was Helen a loving mother hounded by an impossible situation, or a woman who, in her shame, doomed her child and herself? Could this fate have been averted if someone had noticed the signs, if she had asked for help, if the walls around her heart had not grown so high? Alan, though shattered, chose a path of empathy rather than blame. He set up the Maya Fraser Fund, supporting young women in the Highlands who face hardship, and worked to raise awareness of mental health challenges, particularly for those isolated by debt or illness. He spoke at local schools about recognizing pain before it's too late, urging others to reach out no matter how alone they felt. No one survives entirely alone, he told reporters. If you feel lost, ask. If you love someone, check on them before the silence is all that remains. Detective McLeod, too, gave interviews about the case, pushing for reforms in rural mental health care and social safety nets. She told the BBC, "The Frasers' story is a tragedy, but it's not a unique one. There are families struggling, unseen, all around us. We must do better to see, to listen, to help." The drone footage, Helen's journal, and the raw heartbreak of the Frasers' story climbed the front pages of Scottish and British newspapers. For months, the case provoked endless debate about self-reliance, about how easily even the strong can falter, and about the invisible burdens so many carry. On what would have been Mia's 23rd birthday, Alan hiked to the ridge above the hollow, where wildflowers flourished in the Highland sun. He placed a small hand-carved memorial for both Helen and Mia, watching the wind spin the pine cones into the blue sky. At last, some small peace returned to the glen, but the lessons lingered, carried by everyone who heard their story. Sometimes, the most haunting mysteries are not those of supernatural forces, but of ordinary lives unraveling under unbearable weight. Sometimes, it takes the gaze of a silent machine, the eye of a drone, to see the pain people keep buried, even from those who love them most. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is not surviving alone in the wild, but reaching for help when the darkness deepens. In the end, the mountains kept Helen and Mia's secret far longer than anyone thought possible. But when truth finally emerged, it was not through heroics or chance. but through relentless searching, quiet hope, and technology that sees what human eyes cannot. Their story is a solemn reminder. Behind every headline that fades and every missing person poster that yellows in the sun, there are real families, silent struggles, and hearts that never stop searching. The wilderness tests the body, but it is life's hidden storms, illness, debt, despair, that test the soul. Helen and Mia Fraser's final journey was not one of adventure, but of survival against impossible odds. For the people of Uvimore, for Alan, and for all who cared, their story became a plea echoing on the highland winds. Never let pride or fear silence a cry for help. Sometimes the answers we need are buried just out of sight, waiting for compassion, perseverance, and a willingness to see past the surface. In doing so, maybe we save someone else. Maybe, just maybe, we save ourselves.